The research team worked with an urgency that defined human potential. Traditional research would have taken years. They were doing it in days. Each moment brought them closer to a solution that seemed impossible just weeks ago. As the final calculations completed, Siak looked up and smiled. They had done something that would change galactic history forever. Not through destruction, but through understanding. Humanity had just rewrote the rules of conflict. The final confrontation wasn't what anyone expected. No massive explosions, no traditional battle, just a complex dance of communication and strategic intervention that would redefine galactic conflict forever. Captain J. Park stood on the bridge of the modified spacecraft, watching as the quantum-consuming threat began to unravel. The enemy didn't understand what was happening. Their perfect communication network was slowly dissolving, not through destruction, but through a language they couldn't comprehend. Dr. Yuna Kim's algorithm worked like a sophisticated virus. It didn't attack. It communicated. Each quantum signal carried multiple layers of complexity that confused the enemy's fundamental communication protocols. Imagine speaking a language that completely rewrites the listener's understanding of communication itself. The alien observation ships watched in complete bewilderment. Humans were doing something that defied every known strategic approach. They weren't using massive weapons. They were using something far more powerful, pure adaptive intelligence. Small communication failures began to spread across the quantum network. What seemed like random noise was actually a carefully designed communication disruption strategy. The quantum-consuming civilization found itself facing an opponent that didn't follow any known rules of engagement. Siak Choi monitored the systems, his fingers moving rapidly across the quantum interface. Each calculation was a precise strike against the enemy's fundamental infrastructure. They weren't destroying. They were understanding. The team had prepared for months, understanding that this wasn't a traditional conflict. Traditional warfare meant destruction. Their approach was about communication, adaptation, and psychological intervention. Alien leaders gathered in their massive communication chambers, watching in shock. The civilization they had considered the weakest was systematically dismantling their most advanced technological network without firing a single traditional weapon. How? One alien representative asked, his voice filled with confusion and a hint of respect. You were supposed to be the weakest. Jay simply smiled. Weakness is often a matter of perspective. The quantum network began to collapse from within, not through violent destruction, but through a complex communication intervention that made its own infrastructure question its fundamental existence. It was communication as a form of warfare. Global celebration began quietly. In research facilities, communication centers, and military bases, humans watched as their understanding changed the course of galactic history. This wasn't just a victory. This was a statement about human potential. Yuna understood the deeper significance. They had proven that intelligence wasn't about raw technological power. It was about creativity, adaptability, and the ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. The final moments of the confrontation were almost anticlimactic. The quantum-consuming threat didn't explode. It simply dissolved, transformed by a communication strategy so complex, so unexpected, that it couldn't maintain its own fundamental structure. Alien civilizations that had ignored the original distress call now watched in complete shock. The civilization they had considered primitive had just solved a problem that had threatened multiple star systems. Communication channels across the galaxy began to change. Humans weren't just another young civilization anymore. They were a strategic partner, a civilization that could solve problems in ways no one had ever imagined. Siak looked at the final calculations. They had done something unprecedented. Not through massive technological superiority, but through pure creative intelligence. The Bohr research team celebrated quietly. No massive parties, just a deep understanding that they had changed everything. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology, but in its ability to adapt, to understand, to communicate. J. Park watched the final quantum signals dissolve. The threat that had consumed entire star systems was now gone. not through destruction but through understanding. As alien representatives gathered to discuss the unprecedented intervention, one thing became clear. Humanity had just announced its arrival on the galactic stage, and they had done it in the most unexpected way possible. They had proven that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest strategic advantage. The universe would never be the same again. Space stretched before them like an endless black canvas, dotted with the menacing silhouettes of the enemy's quantum infrastructure. The communication systems hummed with a low, almost imperceptible frequency that made the crew's skin tingle. "Prepare, initial disruption protocol," Hyun spoke calmly, his fingers dancing across the modified control panel. The bridge crew exchanged quick glances. They were about to do something no civilization had ever attempted. The quantum-consuming threat was massive. Imagine a living network that could consume entire star systems, absorbing technological infrastructure, like a hungry organism. Most civilizations would have retreated. Humans were about to prove why they were different. Dr. Seok Chen, the mission's lead quantum strategist, had developed an unprecedented approach. Instead of direct confrontation, they would introduce a series of psychological and technological disruptions that would confuse the enemy's fundamental communication network. The first wave of intervention was subtle. Complex signal patterns began to interfere with the quantum-consuming civilization's primary communication grid. It wasn't an attack. It was more like a carefully designed virus that would slowly destabilize their entire system. Alien observation ships watched in confusion. Their advanced sensors couldn't comprehend the human approach. Where were the weapons? Where was the traditional military strategy? The humans were doing something entirely unexpected. Hyun understood something fundamental about conflict that most advanced civilizations missed. War wasn't just about destruction. It was about communication, adaptation, and understanding your enemy's fundamental weaknesses. The spacecraft moved with an almost organic flexibility. Traditional navigation systems would have been impossible in this complex quantum environment. But the human team had developed something revolutionary. An adaptive navigation protocol that could predict and modify movement in milliseconds. "Target identified," Seok announced, his voice calm despite the massive risk they were taking. The quantum-consuming threat's primary communication node was vulnerable. But vulnerability wasn't about physical weakness. It was about psychological predictability. Alien communication channels began to show strange distortions. What seemed like random noise was actually a carefully designed communication disruption strategy. The humans weren't fighting. They were communicating in a language the enemy couldn't understand. Each modified signal carried multiple layers of complexity. Some were designed to confuse. Some were designed to gather information. Some were designed to create psychological uncertainty within the quantum-consuming network. The observation ships from other alien civilizations watched in complete bewilderment. Humans were doing something that defied every known strategic approach. They weren't using massive weapons. They were using something far more powerful: intelligence and creativity. Hyun remembered the training. Every team member understood that this wasn't just a mission. This was humanity's first major interaction with a galactic threat. They weren't just fighting. They were proving a point about human potential. The quantum network began to show signs of disruption. Small communication failures started to spread like a complex virus. The enemy couldn't understand the attack because it wasn't a traditional attack. It was something entirely new. Psychological disruption at 62% effectiveness, Seok reported, a slight smile crossing his face. They were rewriting the rules of galactic conflict, one quantum signal at a time. The spacecraft moved like a ghost through the complex quantum environment. No massive weapons, no traditional military approach, just pure adaptive human intelligence working at speeds that defied conventional understanding. As the first phase of intervention completed, something remarkable happened. The quantum-consuming threat found itself facing an opponent it had never encountered before. An opponent that didn't follow any known rules of engagement. Humans had entered the galactic stage, and they were about to change everything. Dr. Seok Choi's hands moved rapidly across the quantum interface, his eyes reflecting the complex holographic displays that filled the research chamber. 72 hours of continuous work had led to this moment, a breakthrough that would change everything. The quantum-consuming threat had seemed unbeatable. Most civilizations would have surrendered. But humans saw something different, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Siak had discovered a critical vulnerability in the enemy's communication network. It wasn't about massive weapons or overwhelming force. It was about understanding the fundamental weakness in their quantum infrastructure. The research team worked like a single organism. Each member brought a unique perspective. A former network engineer sat next to a quantum physicist. A cultural communication expert discussed strategies with a military strategist. This was humanity's true strength, the ability to combine different types of intelligence. Look here, Siak pointed to a complex holographic representation. What seemed like random noise was actually a precise communication pattern. The quantum-consuming civilization believed their network was perfect, but no system was truly perfect. Commander. Yuna Kim watched the breakthrough unfold. She understood that this wasn't just a scientific discovery. This was a strategic weapon more powerful than any physical weapon could be. The vulnerability was elegant in its simplicity. The quantum network relied on a consistent communication protocol that assumed all interactions would follow predictable patterns. Humans were about to prove how wrong that assumption was. Siak's algorithm was unlike anything seen before. It wasn't designed to destroy. It was designed to communicate in a way the enemy couldn't understand. Imagine speaking a language that completely confuses the listener, but through complex mathematical patterns. We're not fighting, Siak explained to his team. We're having a conversation they can't comprehend. The research facility buzzed with excitement. Computer systems processed calculations at speeds that would have been impossible just years ago. Each simulation revealed more about the enemy's fundamental weakness. Global resources had been pooled for this moment. Countries that once competed now worked together. National boundaries meant nothing compared to the galactic threat they faced. Young engineers developed modification techniques that defied traditional understanding. They weren't creating massive weapons. They were creating adaptive communication systems that could change in milliseconds. The quantum-consuming threat had conquered numerous star systems. They had advanced technology that made human systems look primitive. But they had never encountered human creativity. Siak's breakthrough wasn't just about breaking a communication network. It was about proving that intelligence wasn't about raw technological power. It was about adaptability, creativity, and the ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. As the algorithm took shape, something remarkable happened. The complex quantum network began to show signs of confusion. Small communication failures started to spread like a carefully designed virus. Psychological disruption at 78% effectiveness, a team member reported. The numbers told a story of something unprecedented. The alien observation teams watching the human intervention couldn't comprehend what was happening. Where were the massive weapons? Where was the traditional military approach? The humans were doing something entirely unexpected. Commander Yuna understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. This was humanity's announcement to the galaxy, a statement that said, "We might be young, but we are far from weak." Siak's algorithm could potentially neutralize the entire quantum-consuming network without firing a single traditional weapon. It was communication as a form of warfare, understanding as a form of defense. The vast darkness of space hummed with an urgent transmission that cut through countless light years. At the United Earth Global Communication Center, a massive holographic display flickered with alien signals that most civilizations would have ignored. Captain J. Park stood perfectly still, his dark eyes scanning the intricate patterns of the message. The transmission wasn't just another random galactic noise. It was a desperate call for help, a plea from an advanced alien confederation, facing a threat so massive that it could potentially consume entire star systems. Most technologically superior civilizations had already dismissed the message, calculating the risks as too high and the potential rewards too low. But humans were different. Jay remembered the briefing from earlier that day. The senior leadership had gathered in a secure underground facility, analyzing every pixel of the alien transmission. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead xenolinguistics expert, had spent hours decoding the complex communication patterns. "It's not just a distress signal," she had explained, her fingers tracing holographic language algorithms. "It's a genuine request for intervention. They're asking for assistance against a quantum-consuming civilization that destroys entire planetary systems." The room had been silent. Earth was still considered a relatively young civilization by galactic standards. Their technology was advanced but still primitive compared to some interstellar societies. Most alien civilizations viewed humans as unpredictable, chaotic, and technologically limited. What those civilizations didn't understand was human determination. Jay watched as his team prepared the initial response. Young technicians worked rapidly, their fingers dancing across quantum communication interfaces. Each movement was precise, calculated, yet carried an underlying sense of excitement. Outside the communication center, the world continued its normal rhythm. People walked city streets, unaware that their planet was about to make a decision that would change galactic history. Some would later say it was courage. Others would call it naive bravery. The transmission required an immediate decision. The Alien Confederation needed a response within standard galactic time, approximately 72 Earth hours. Most advanced civilizations would spend weeks analyzing risks, drafting diplomatic responses, and consulting multiple administrative councils. Humans were different. "We'll respond," Jay announced, his voice cutting through the technological hum of the communication center. No lengthy meetings, no bureaucratic delays. Just a simple, direct commitment. The technicians around him paused, looking up with a mixture of surprise and respect. Captain Park wasn't just making a casual statement. He was representing humanity's most fundamental characteristic, the willingness to face the unknown. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, understanding the profound implication of that moment. Humanity wasn't just responding to a distress call. They were announcing their presence in the galactic community. Communication protocols were activated. Quantum encryption systems engaged. The response would be direct, clear, and unmistakable. No flowery diplomatic language, no complicated explanations. Just a simple message that would echo across star systems. "Earth receives your transmission. We are prepared to assist." Those 7 words would become legendary in future galactic archives. The Alien Confederation hadn't expected a response from Earth. They hadn't anticipated that the planet considered technologically immature would be the only civilization willing to confront the quantum-consuming threat. As the message transmitted, something remarkable happened in the communication center. A sense of collective purpose filled the room. Young technicians, seasoned, military personnel, and scientific experts shared a moment of unified commitment. They weren't just sending a message. They were making a statement about humanity's potential. Captain J. Park watched the transmission indicators. Each blinking light represented not just technological communication, but a promise that humans, despite their apparent limitations, would stand against impossible odds. The quantum communication system hummed. Distant star systems waited, and humanity's response was already traveling faster than light, carrying with it a message that would soon stun the entire galactic community. This was just the beginning. The preparation began quietly, almost invisibly. Dr. Yuna Kim stood in a secure research facility. Her team gathered around a holographic display that showed the complex quantum threat they would soon face. The room buzzed with an electric tension of anticipation and determination. Earth's leadership had assembled an unlikely group of professionals. Military strategists sat next to quantum physicists. Cultural experts conversed with technological innovators. They represented humanity's most adaptable minds, each bringing a unique perspective to the massive challenge ahead. "We're not the strongest," Yuna said, pointing to the holographic representation of the alien threat. "But we're the most adaptable." The team worked in shifts that blended into one another. Coffee machines never stopped brewing. Computer screens displayed complex calculations that would make most scientists dizzy. But this team was different. They saw patterns where others saw chaos. Military Commander Lee brought a practical approach. He understood that traditional warfare wouldn't work against a quantum-consuming civilization. They needed something unexpected, something that defied conventional strategic thinking. Dr. Park, a quantum physicist with wild hair and even wilder ideas, developed a series of adaptive communication disruption protocols. His theories were so unconventional that they initially seemed like science fiction. But in this room, impossible was just a starting point. The team discovered the alien threat's primary weakness wasn't technological. It was psychological. The quantum-consuming civilization operated on predictable patterns, believing that advanced technology always followed specific rules. Humans were about to prove them wrong. Training began in multiple simulation environments. Virtual reality chambers allowed the team to experience potential scenarios. They practiced communication strategies, technological interventions, and psychological warfare techniques that would make traditional military leaders laugh. Funding came from an unexpected global collaboration. Countries that had previously competed now worked together. National boundaries seemed meaningless compared to the galactic threat. Resources were pooled. The best minds were recruited. Young engineers developed modification techniques for standard spacecraft. They weren't creating massive weapons. Instead, they focused on adaptability, quick response, and unexpected maneuverability. Each design challenge was met with creative solutions that defied traditional engineering concepts. Cultural experts studied the quantum-consuming civilization's communication patterns. They discovered subtle nuances that could be exploited. Communication wasn't just about language. It was about understanding fundamental psychological triggers. The facility operated like a living organism. Information flowed constantly. Ideas were generated, tested, and modified within hours. Traditional research would have taken months or years. But this team worked with an urgency that defined human potential. Psychological preparation was equally important. The team underwent specialized training that blended mental resilience with strategic thinking. They learned to view challenges as opportunities, to see limitations as potential advantages. Commander Lee developed a training program that emphasized unpredictability. Soldiers weren't just taught to follow orders. They were taught to think independently, to make decisions in milliseconds, to turn unexpected situations into strategic advantages. Global satellite networks were reconfigured. Communication systems were modified. Every technological resource was prepared for a conflict that seemed impossible to win. But impossibility was a concept humans rarely accepted. Yuna watched her team work, seeing something beyond their individual skills. They represented humanity's true strength, the ability to come together, to adapt, to face the unknown with creativity and determination. The quantum-consuming civilization had advanced technology. They had massive resources. They had conquered numerous star systems. But they had never encountered humans. They didn't understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology, it was imagination. As preparation continued, a quiet excitement grew. This wasn't just a mission. This was humanity's chance to prove its worth in the vast, complex universe. Every calculation, every strategy, every modification carried the hope of an entire planet. The team didn't see themselves as underdogs. They saw themselves as the first line of defense for not just Earth, but potentially for countless civilizations they'd never meet. Preparation was nearly complete. The impossible mission was about to begin. The modified spacecraft approached the conflict zone with an unexpected grace. Commander Hyun Lee's vessel looked almost primitive compared to the massive alien warships surrounding the quantum-consuming threat. But appearances could be deceiving.